In today's world, most people who hold a religious belief hold it based entirely on where they were born. A person born in India is Hindu. A person born in the West is Christian. The belief is installed in them before the person is capable enough to examine it, and in most cases, it never gets examined at all. Very few people ever step back far enough to look at the patterns running underneath all of these traditions and ask what the actual human qualities, the psychology, the actions, the way of being in the world that these figures embodied actually were, and what they had in common across completely different civilizations and completely different centuries. When you look at Krishna and Jesus through that lens, taking away the religious mythology and focusing only on what these two beings actually did, how they actually moved through the world, how they related to suffering, to the people around them, and to truth itself, something becomes impossible to ignore. Both figures lived in societies built around rigid religious and political hierarchies that claimed exclusive authority over the relationship between human beings and the divine. Both of them rejected that claim completely, and they did it with a clarity and a force that made the established powers of their time feel genuinely threatened. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita does not tell Arjuna to consult the priests or defer to the religious authorities of his time. He speaks directly to the human being in front of him about the nature of reality and what genuine action in the world actually requires. He bypasses every institutional intermediary entirely and points the individual directly at their own direct experience of truth as the only valid authority. The Brahmin class of his time, the religious establishment that controlled access to the sacred, is not where Krishna directs anyone. He directs them inward. Jesus does exactly the same thing, with exactly the same force. When he walks into the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers, he is not lashing out on a random act of anger. He is making a precise statement about what happens when religious institution becomes a mechanism for power and profit, rather than a genuine pathway to truth. When he tells the Pharisees that the kingdom of heaven is within you, he is dismantling in a single sentence the entire architecture of institutional religion that positions itself as the necessary intermediary between the human being and the divine. He is saying the same thing Krishna said. The authority is not out there in any institution or any hierarchy. It is inside the direct experience of the individual human being. Both of them paid for that position with their lives. Krishna's teachings threatened the established order of his time deeply enough to generate enemies who wanted him gone. Jesus was executed by a collaboration between the religious establishment and the political power of Rome, precisely because what he was saying and doing undermined the authority both of those institutions depended on for their survival. The pattern is identical because the psychology driving it was identical. A being so completely free of the need for institutional approval, so grounded in their own direct experience of truth, that the gap between what they were living and what the established power was selling became impossible to ignore or contain. What made both Krishna and Jesus psychologically extraordinary was not the miracles attributed to them in the stories written about them afterward. It was something far more rare and far more demanding than any supernatural ability. It was the complete absence of ego operating alongside the highest possible level of human capacity and influence. Most human beings who develop genuine power, influence, or ability to move and shape the people around them use that power in the service of the self in some form. The accumulation of status, the need for recognition, the building of a legacy, the subtle satisfaction of being seen as exceptional. These are the almost universal companions of human greatness. They are what the ego does with capacity when it gets the opportunity. Neither Krishna nor Jesus operated this way, and the evidence for this is in the specific choices they made when power was directly available to them. Krishna, whose abilities and whose influence were beyond anything his contemporaries could match, consistently refused the throne and consistently directed every encounter back toward the liberation of the person he was speaking with, rather than toward his own elevation. The entire Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Krishna and a single human being in crisis. The most cosmically powerful figure in the Hindu tradition spends the most important moment of his life completely focused on the genuine liberation of one person. That is the psychology of someone for whom the self has become genuinely transparent. Jesus moved through his entire ministry with the same quality. When the crowds want to make him king after the feeding of the 5,000, he withdraws. When the devil offers him all the kingdoms of the world in the wilderness temptation, he refuses without hesitation. When Peter tries to prevent his arrest in Gethsemane, he stops him. At every point where the ego could have stepped in and claimed what the situation was offering, it does not appear. What appears instead is a complete and unwavering orientation toward something that has nothing to do with personal elevation and everything to do with the genuine liberation of the people he came into contact with. Both also held simultaneously what most human beings find psychologically impossible to sustain together: unconditional love and absolute, uncompromising truth. Most people can manage one or the other. They can be loving in a way that avoids difficult truths to protect the relationship, or they can be truthful in a way that is hard and uncompromising, but lacks the warmth that makes truth genuinely transformative rather than simply painful. Krishna and Jesus both held both at full intensity at the same time, without diluting either one to make the other more comfortable. Krishna loves Arjuna completely and tells him the hardest truth available with complete directness in the same breath. Jesus weeps at the tomb of Lazarus out of genuine human love and tells the Pharisees exactly what they are with a clarity that removes every comfortable illusion they had about themselves in the same ministry. The love does not soften the truth, and the truth does not harden the love. They operate together as a single, undivided quality of presence that is only possible in a human being who has genuinely moved beyond the ego's management of how they are perceived. Lastly, both of them moved through suffering with a quality that revealed the same thing about the nature of what they had developed internally. Krishna faces the complete destruction of his own people, the Yadavas, and the end of the world he built, with a quality of equanimity that has everything to do with a relationship with reality that is moved beyond the ego's need for things to be different from what they are. Jesus moves through the agony of Gethsemane, through the betrayal, through the crucifixion, with a quality of presence and even forgiveness that is only possible in a being whose mind and soul has been developed to a level where even the most extreme external circumstances cannot collapse the ground they are standing on. These are the connections between Krishna and Jesus. All of these are pointing towards the reality of what becomes possible in a being who has fully embodied the highest expression of human development: the complete transparency of ego, the simultaneous holding of love and truth, the rejection of institutional power in favor of direct experience, and the relationship with suffering that transforms it from something that destroys into something that heals and reveals. They were not the same person in the same sense as many suggest. They were two beings who arrived at the same place and source through different paths in different centuries in different civilizations.